Now basically you could open when you want, close when you want, and the mall doesn't open except 12 till 7 or sometimes till 6 because everything is so really bad. It's really, I mean, banks stealing everybody's money, people are not shopping, nobody wants to work, so I just sit a couple of hours and go home.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Dead Mall Walking. What you just heard was part of a conversation I had with a tenant in Eastdale Mall in Montgomery, Alabama, that I inadvertently recorded while I was gathering footage of the mall. We spoke at length about her situation, including her struggles to make a success of the business after her husband, who formerly managed the store, passed away, and what having a shop in Eastdale is really like. What she described isn't a unique story when it comes to what malls in the US and beyond have faced over the past couple of years. A severe downturn due to COVID that's often followed by a lethargic response to get things going again on the part of some mall owners and management. But I love hearing personal takes from people like her, who have boots on the ground, so to speak. Opened in 1977, the mall's first day saw more than 5,000 shoppers brave the rain to come and check out the property, which was legitimately popular for a time. But despite outlasting the competing Montgomery Mall, opened in 1970 and closed permanently in 2008, this mall is struggling today. Since its grand opening, Eastdale's anchor stores have changed more times than the Cleveland Browns have changed quarterbacks. This place has hosted Montgomery Ward, Sears, Parisian, Pizitz, McRae's, Gaffer's, JCPenney, Dillard's, Belk, and At Home as anchors. It retains those last four today, and also currently has a Chuck E. Cheese's acting as a de facto anchor. Check out this place coming up on the left. Every kiss begins with J. The mall's issues are thanks in part to newer and glossier competition, the shops at EastChase, which opened in 2002. EastChase has managed to secure a number of mall staples, Gap, Victoria's Secret, Champs, Sunglass Hut, that are notably absent from Eastdale as a result. When I mentioned to some folks at my hotel, shout out to the Candlewood Suites, that I was planning to visit Eastdale, their response was one of confusion, maybe even concern. There's a certain degree of hysteria around this mall, with one online commenter claiming that, as a white man, he was told multiple times to leave the mall by groups of African Americans. Another TripAdvisor reviewer called the place creepy, dangerous, and empty. And perhaps there's a grain of truth to this hysteria. There was a shooting inside the mall in 2018, as well as an armed robbery and another shooting on the perimeter of the mall in the last couple of years. Gun crime is an issue that crops up regularly regarding the mall. Like in this Google review. I know I shouldn't laugh, but I do find it funny that this review is essentially, my child could have died, but the mall gets 5 stars. One reason I felt confident visiting the mall, which I did on a weekday morning, was the fact that part of it had recently been revamped for an appearance in the reboot of The Wonder Years. I'm not sure whether or not the show plans to return to the mall, but some 6 months after filming, I found that parts of the set still remained in a wing that was otherwise more or less empty. Strangely, the fountain up here is still running, even though the area was pretty much deserted. There's a degree of irony to the fact that, even though The Wonder Years is set in 1960s Montgomery, it doesn't seem like set decorators needed to do a ton to get this mall looking that old. Yes, the purpose-built mall kiosks are retro, and some vintage signage has been added to vacant storefronts. But you'll notice, for example, that they didn't do anything to change the mall's existing tile floor. I didn't actually watch the episode the mall is featured in until after I got back from my trip. But it's cool to see somewhere on the small screen that I'd been able to wander around in just a few days earlier. Very different to the way the revamped wing of Gwinnett Place Mall, aka Starcourt Mall in Stranger Things, was completely blocked off to the public. Right now the mall's occupancy is probably around 70%. Wikipedia suggests that it has space for 100 plus stores and 5 anchors, but it's not quite at that level right now. If what the tenant I spoke to earlier said is true, then its management face an uphill battle to restore it to its former glory. One thing that won't help with that is the closure of the Ice Palace, an ice rink that was reportedly under renovation during my visit. Looking at its condition, I wasn't surprised to hear from a viewer of the channel that it's since been closed permanently. Apparently it'll be replaced with a roller rink, and we can only hope that they keep those wild rainbow lights, which are visible from throughout the mall, up above it. Or maybe you'd rather they banish them forever. I feel like most people have a strong opinion on that one way or the other. All in all, my experience in the mall didn't tally with some of the horror stories I'd read online. There's no doubt that the mall feels run down, and statistics indicate that it sits in a deprived area. But I didn't feel particularly unsafe here. I even had pleasant conversations with a couple of different tenants. Then again, I can't offer any insight into what it's like at weekends or after dark. There's a nice blend of national chains and mom and pop stores in here, sometimes sitting right next to each other, that makes for an interesting browsing experience. Still, this mall is in trouble. You have to wonder how many years, no pun intended, it has left if bigger brands like Foot Locker and Spencer's jump ship for the shops at EastChase when their leases expire. Speaking of Spencer's, this mall's is one of those rare gems that retains its vintage branding. The food court here isn't exactly going to blow any minds, with Charlie's Philly steaks being the only brand name option. There's also Auntie Anne's, Cinnabon, and Great American cookies scattered around the mall, but if you're on the market for something savoury, you could always grab a slice at Chuck E. Cheese's. As a guy in his 30s with a bunch of camera equipment and no kids in tow, I decided that probably wasn't the greatest place for me to make myself at home. But I wanted to include the food court in this video because it gave me some real Starcourt Mall vibes. Right down to the pillars around a section of table and chairs under a skylight. If you're looking for a taste of Hawkins, Indiana, this is a pretty decent simulation of that. There's even a bunch of neon on the way out of it. I actually really enjoyed my trip to Eastdale Mall. The heady combination of the Starcourt vibes, the Wonder Years sets, and the former glory turned white elephant of the Ice Palace made for an interesting walk around. There was no shortage of quirky stuff to check out. All the way through the first vending machine for hair extensions that I've ever seen. We'll be returning to Montgomery, Alabama in the near future when I'm finally able to post my short documentary on Sammy Stevens and the legendary flea market Montgomery. A near finished version is actually already available to Patreon supporters, but I'm still awaiting final clearance on a few things before I can post it here on the main channel. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you consider leaving a like and subscribing if you enjoyed it. My Instagram and Patreon, and some other ways to support the channel, are linked below. Just make sure you follow the rules, or you might find yourself out on the street. Until next time, goodbye from Eastdale Mall.